Clips.
And remember, citizens, always subscribe. Hit the notification bell as well. And $19.95 plus shipping and handling will keep you out of hell. Alrighty, boop, chips. Welcome to your daily politics. Tits. If you like politics, but you're sick of the tits, then watch daily politics. Something like that. Anyway, interesting times. So let's go and compare notes from as many English speaking outlets, news outlets, news holes out there, and see what they are, or as today might turn out to be, are not telling us today. So we'll have a wee look what Reuters is talking about, what TASS is talking about, what the BBC is or isn't talking about. Sky News will be very interesting. Al Jazeera, get a bit of RT. What's the time? We try and start pausing these. I think we start with Press TV. That would be interesting. The German wave seems to, at the moment,
climate topics, subscribe to this channel. We've got new videos.
I couldn't get their live stream earlier. They must have been starting a new one or something. So the German, oh my god, check that dude's bonce out. That must be his barrister wig. See if I can stomach a wee bit of that later. GB News. It's nothing quite like a news channel making the news. I think it was BBC were talking about them earlier on.
Protect their skies as they defend against continued Russian strikes on critical civilian infrastructure.
Where the fuck's that coming from?
Ukrainian forces are fighting hard to hold against Russian advances across the front lines. Ukraine's...
Why is he talking about Ukraine when it was meant to be about Israel? But anyway. So you get the general idea. That's on the top of the hour. So let's go.
President Raisi, the late President Raisi advanced it in terms of challenging.
I think that's basically what it's going to be all day on Press TV, isn't it? It's going to be the
spheres of influence, particularly not just in the West of Asia,
the
but
funerals.
also in the African countries. That remember for
so what have we had happen in the last couple of days?
The Palestinian
their helicopter went down. 7 dead, the Prime Minister and Foreign Minister, arguably the two most powerful people in the Iranian regime. And what else has happened? The Slovakian Prime Minister got 3 or 4 shots in him. My lord.
Booker, are you with us? May have lost Booker. On to you, Simos and Abbas. Let's expand now what we can. Okay, Booker, I think you're back with us. We lost you there for a second. Go ahead.
Oh God, that's really, really badly put together. So,
there's no end in sight over how you're going to continue to destroy the Earth.
Business deals.
Planet of a million man. We have very good propaganda in our press here in Europe.
A new combo.
In the city of Tabriz for the funeral procession. As Iran mourns the deaths of its president and foreign minister, Washington defends its heavy sanctions policy against Iran after being blamed for the incident.
I'm going to apologize for our sanctions regime at all. It's the Iranian government that is responsible for the decision to fly a 45-year-old helicopter in what was described as poor weather conditions, not any other actor.
Double standards and a parade of American hypocrisy. Moscow slams the U.S. for standing by Israel after the International Criminal Court seeks arrest warrants for the country's top officials over the war in Gaza. And it is the first day since the political powers of Ukrainian leader Vladimir Zelensky officially expired as he refuses to hold elections, citing martial law in the country.
Well, that's nice.
You're watching
No
RT
elections
International.
for
I'm Rachel Rubel,
Ukraine.
live in Moscow. Iran has entered 5 days of mourning after the country's president and foreign minister died in a helicopter crash. Iranians have gathered for the funeral ceremony of their country's senior officials, which will last for 3 days and take place in several cities across Iran. You're looking live now at that funeral procession as it takes place. Crowds of people have packed into mosques to pray for those who perished. The bodies of the Iranian president, foreign minister, and other officials and staff have been transported to Tabriz, the capital city of Iran's East Azerbaijan province, where the helicopter went down on Sunday. While Tehran looks into the cause of the fatal crash, new images have emerged of emergency crews first discovering the wreckage of the aircraft. The Red Crescent has reported that everyone on board the helicopter died moments after it went down. Recent reports claim a technical failure and weather conditions were likely to blame for the crash. Meanwhile, Tehran has given assurances this will not affect the government's work, with the Iranian vice president serving as acting head of state until an election is held. Let's take a look at the events preceding their fatal flight.
GG, Doberman. Nothing quite says top-rate news coverage than a cartoon clock ticking in the background. Visibility. National and Red Crescent rescue teams. God fucking mighty, man. How dumbed down is this? Where's the two wee American guys to rap the news to us again? That's how I like my news. Rapped to me with dumbass American guys wearing clown suits. See the music they're playing as well? No doubt that'll all be fucking copyrighted up the shitter as well. Jesus, showing them, man. What's wrong with news nowadays?
After the Iranian president's death, that comes as the former Iranian foreign minister said responsibility for the crash lies with Washington over its restrictions on Iran's aviation industry.
One of the main culprits
this?
is the United States, which has placed an
Iranian
embargo on the
foreign
supply
minister.
of aircraft and aviation parts to Iran, and does
Mohammed.
not allow the Iranian people to
Never,
enjoy
never
good
gonna guess
aviation
that,
base.
man.
This will be included in the list of U.S. crimes against Iran.
The U.S. is one of the main responsible for the Iranian president helicopter crash due to the sanctions.
So first of all, we are not going to apologize for our sanctions regime at all. The Iranian government has used its aircraft to transport equipment to support terrorism. So we will continue to fully enforce our sanctions regime, including our sanctions regimes on aircraft for use by the Iranian government. Ultimately, it's the Iranian government that is responsible for the decision to fly a 45-year-old helicopter in
When did Orion come
what
in?
was described as poor weather conditions, not any other actor.
American officials took the opportunity to lash out at the late Iranian president and his politics. That's as many countries are expressing their support over the death of the leader, remembering him as a strong politician and individual. This list includes fellow BRICS member India. RT correspondent Ranjan Sharma has more.
India's announced a day
hilarious.
of state mourning on the 21st of May, which is
Hearing
today, to mark respect,
so-called
pay
journalists
condolences to
trying
the
to be
Iranian leadership on the death of their president, his
unbiased and
foreign
whatnot,
minister, and 7
over
others
this.
who were on board the
And they
chopper
can't,
that
they just keep
crashed
going
on
on, the
Sunday
butcher of
at the
Tehran, the
Iranian
butcher of Tehran.
Azerbaijan border. Now, what India is doing is all the government official buildings where the national flag is flown, it will be flown at half-mast today. Also, there will be no official entertainment for today. But it's not just India that is mourning. There's other countries as well, like Iraq, Lebanon, Pakistan, there's Syria, Tajikistan, as well as Turkey. Some are mourning for a day, some for 2, some for 3, some for even more. There's leadership from across the world that have expressed shock on the tragic death of the leader of Iran. In fact, Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, was one of the very first world leaders to express his shock and pay his condolences on the death of Ibrahim Raisi.
Deeply saddened and shocked by the tragic demise of Dr. Syed Ibrahim Raisi, President of the Islamic Republic of Iran, his contribution to strengthening India-Iran bilateral relationship will always be remembered. My heartfelt condolences to his family and the people of Iran. India stands with Iran in this time of sorrow.
Condolences from the top Indian leadership for Iran. Iran is a partner of India, despite the country being heavily sanctioned by the West. In fact, just days before the crash,
can only
India signed a
imagine that
deal
the
with Iran on the
conspiracy
Chabahar port,
spheres
a decade-long
set
deal,
alight with
very
us, man.
important one for
Rightly
both
so,
India
man.
and Iran. In fact, right after the deal was signed, the US State Department had indirectly issued threats to India for possible sanctions against countries that will do business with Iran. But this is a deal very important for India. India plans to invest in the Chabahar port over the next few years, around $120 million on the port, but also around the port, around $250 million to build infrastructure. This port, Chabahar port, is expected to open up new markets for India in Central Asia, also to cut time to trade with all partners like Russia, for example, or to send aid to Afghanistan. But India is not the only country that in fact has expressed shock. Like India, other countries also see Iran as a partner, and many have expressed their condolences.
I conveyed to my brother Mohammed Moghber and to the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khomeini the condolences of our people. The deep feeling of our people of solidarity with the brave and heroic people of Iran, with the family of our friend, our brother, President Ibrahim Raisi, who departed to eternity.
Our ministry and department is deeply shocked and saddened at the reports of the passing of His Excellency President Raisi of the Islamic Republic of Iran, as well as my colleague, Minister Abdullahian, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
On behalf of the Chinese people, we express our deep condolences of the death of President Raisi in the helicopter accident. Since taking office, President Raisi has made important contributions to maintaining Iran's security and stability, promoting national development and prosperity, and also made active efforts to consolidate and develop the China-Iran Comprehensive Strategic Partnership.
So very overwhelming support coming in from across the world for Iran, and contrast that to the reaction from the West, very blatantly saying that it was the decision of the Iranian leadership to fly that 4-decade-long chopper. Now, many from across the world are pointing out, what option did Iran really have, a country heavily under sanctions, than to fly that chopper, which needed new parts.
I love the way she says
all eyes on
chopper.
Iran for the next few days, as Iran will soon elect its new
Even better
leadership.
than Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Earlier, we spoke to veteran Syrian diplomat and former ambassador to Turkey, Nidal Kabalan. He says the U.S. bears responsibility not only for the helicopter crash, but also for what he calls its unfair and illegal sanctions policy in the region.
Definitely, the U.S. bears responsibility not only for the crash in one way or another of this helicopter killing the Iranian president, his foreign minister. The Americans bear responsibility for the death of millions of Iraqi children and Palestinian children and Syrian children.
Nobody left unfucking.
Sanctions,
No
by
grave left unturned.
the series of unstoppable lies that have been labeled by Colin Powell and other senior leaders of the American
Come on, how far back are you going to go, man?
Against Iraq, which have proven to be false, and then later sanctions now for almost 13, 14 years against Syria, the Palestinians in Gaza and elsewhere, Lebanon. They are killing millions of innocent people throughout the region. So to bear partial responsibility for the crash is probably not going to add a lot to the record.
Come on, you may be telling us something new.
By the Americans as sponsors of terror, of sanctions, of illegal sanctions, unilateral sanctions that are physically killing people, hundreds of thousands of people monthly in the region due to unfair and illegal sanctions actually forced by the Americans against any nation, any power, any party that opposes their policies, their imperialist policies, and their efforts to conquer and control the whole world.
As the funeral procession for the Iranian president continues, you can see those live images behind me right now. Do stay with RT International for continuing coverage. We'll keep you updated on all the latest developments on air and online. Russian officials have lashed out at the U.S. for double standards, with Washington defending Israel after the ICC prosecutor filed for arrest warrants for top Israeli officials. A year ago, the U.S. supported an arrest warrant against the Russian president.
This is another example of double standards and a parade of American hypocrisy. The U.S. authorities deny the legitimacy of the ICC and intimidate this structure with sanctions when it comes to the interest of Washington itself and its allies. However, they shamelessly use this pseudo-legal tool against those whom they consider enemies.
Washington's statements in connection with the ICC's accusations against the Israeli leadership resemble the reaction of a scorpion stung by itself or a spider entangled in its own web.
The Russian criticism comes in response to emotional reactions in the United States. A State Department spokesperson rejected the ICC appeal, claiming it has no jurisdiction over this matter. House Speaker Mike Johnson went even further, saying the U.S. may propose sanctions against the International Criminal Court. And President Joe Biden also chipped in to defend Israel, claiming what's happening in Gaza is not genocide.
We reject the ICC's application for arrest warrants against Israeli leaders. Israel wants to do all it can to ensure civilian protection. But let me be clear. Contrary to allegations against Israel made by the International Court of Justice, what's happening is not genocide. We reject that.
Earlier, the International Criminal Court's chief prosecutor requested an arrest warrant for the Israeli prime minister alongside the country's defense minister. They stand accused of war crimes in Gaza. ICC prosecutor Karim Khan also wants to see the leadership of Hamas in the dock.
I have reasonable grounds to believe that 3 senior leaders of Hamas bear criminal responsibility for the following international crimes committed on the territory of Israel and the State of Palestine from at least the 7th of October 2023. I can also confirm that I have reasonable grounds to believe that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant bear criminal responsibility for the following international crimes committed on the territory of the State of Palestine from at least the 8th of October 2023.
It didn't come as a surprise. Reports about the ICC's intentions have been circulating since last month. But it did come as a blow below the belt. The Israeli political establishment has gone wild, slamming the International Criminal Court.
As the Prime Minister of Israel, I reject with disgust the Hague prosecutor's comparison between democratic Israel and the mass murderers of Hamas. This is a complete distortion of reality. This is exactly what the new anti-Semitism...
I love pointing this out, right? But you can walk into a room. 2 people can walk into a room And then you can murder 8 of the people and hold an election between the 2 people and go, well, it's a democracy. Well, anybody that didn't want you in that room, you've killed, murdered, kicked out the house.
Looks like. It has moved from the campuses in the West to the court in The Hague. What a shame.
The ICC became a rock. There is a hard place as well. Netanyahu is under tremendous pressure on the home front. He risks seeing his ruling coalition crumble as allies
anti-Semite just doesn't work anymore, doesn't it?
of the war in Gaza. And he's rapidly losing public support too, as regular protests against his leadership mount across the country. Unlike Israeli officials, many citizens see a possible arrest, international or domestic, as a fair fate for the Prime Minister who failed to protect Israelis on October 7th.
She's been going to the same sunbed salon as Donald Trump.
I think it should not stop with Bibi. They all have to go to jail. All the government is criminals. They're killing people, Israeli and Palestinians, with no reason. They all have to go to prison, all of them, one by one.
I think he's bad for the country. I think he's just trying to keep his seat, to keep himself out of trouble, and meanwhile he's letting everything fall apart.
But who says Netanyahu actually cares what Israelis want? He's clearly more worried about securing support from Washington. For Washington, the International Criminal Court is not good or credible enough, especially when it investigates if American forces committed war crimes in Afghanistan, or when it considers an arrest warrant against the leadership of Washington's ally over war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza. But once Vladimir Putin is in the ICC's spotlight, the court suddenly becomes fair and upright for the Americans.
Well, I think it's justified, but the question is, it's not recognized internationally by us either. But I think it makes a very strong point.
The U.S. supports all international efforts to examine atrocities in Ukraine, including the investigation by the ICC and the reporting by the UN Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine.
The United States supports a range of international investigations into Russia's atrocities in Ukraine, including the one conducted by the ICC, but we do not weigh in on each decision and development as part of those investigations.
Israel has made it clear the ICC's warrants approved by a panel of judges, or in fact any warrant, will not stop the Prime Minister and his government's war on Gaza. The news that made world headlines will hardly make changes on the ground, but it certainly piles more pressure on the Israelis and the American allies, who are becoming increasingly isolated as the global majority rallies for Palestine.
Oh, dearie me, man.
Marie Fnoshna, RT, reporting from Jerusalem.
Palestinian National Initiative Party leader Mustafa Barghouti says Washington's support of Israel is a clear double standard.
I hope that the court does not shy away and does not show any cowardness under American pressure, which is absolutely hypocritical. From one side, they welcome the court decisions against Russia, and now they are condemning the court for issuing these decisions about Israel. That shows how much the United States is following total and complete double standard. Because the American leaders think that the world should work according to their will. And they think that the court of justice, the only court of justice in the world, is the United States Senate and Congress, which is, by the way, now some of its members are threatening to take punitive acts against the International Court of Justice. Something unbelievable. They don't believe in international law. The United States does not believe in international law. It believes in the law of jungle and in the law of power. Whoever has the power can do whatever they like.
The Australian and New Zealand governments announced on Tuesday they're sending planes to evacuate their nationals from crisis-stricken New Caledonia. Now, this comes as pro-independence protesters continue to push back against fresh forces by maintaining roadblocks on the archipelago. Paris sent over 1,000 security forces to reclaim the road from the airport to the capital of Noumea. A state of emergency was declared in the region after the death toll from clashes rose to 6. The unrest broke out over Paris's intentions to enforce a new law that would give tens of thousands of non-Indigenous residents voting rights. Protesters say they won't back down until the text of the law is withdrawn.
Would that be all the French people that they
give up until they
imported?
withdraw the text they're about to vote on. No, we won't give up. Even if we have to die for it, we'll stay here on the roadblocks.
All the talk about being out of breath and all that, we're not out of breath. We're waiting for this text to be withdrawn because it means the elimination of the Kanak people. We're already in the minority. If they get this text through Congress in Versailles, we're screwed. That's what they don't understand over there. We're already a minority at home.
Ukrainian leader Vladimir Zelensky's presidential term has officially expired. Elections for the country's top job were supposed to take place in March, but were postponed by martial law. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev said the delays are indicative of a failed state.
All these manipulations with laws mean only one thing: the death of the failed state of Ukraine, its transformation into a classic failed state, to use American vocabulary. The West supported Zelensky's decision not to hold elections precisely because it is afraid of the shameful fall of his criminal regime.
Zelensky imposed martial law over Ukraine in February of 2022 and has prolonged it repeatedly since then. The status prohibits any elections, including the presidential race. Several extensions of the martial law have pushed Zelensky's time in office past the constitutionally mandated 5 years. The Ukrainian leader has refused to hold elections this year. We heard from international economist Martin Armstrong, who says Zelensky is pushing back the vote because his chances at victory are slim.
He has suspended the elections as long as the war goes on. So as long as the war goes on, then he remains president. That seems to be a conflict of interest. Internally, a lot of people in Ukraine are beginning to realize that when he killed the deal for peace at the request of Boris Johnson, why? You know, Ukrainian people have no right to negotiate, you know, on their own behalf. So his election, you know, I think it's a fraud, and he's deliberately postponing it because I think if he went to election, you would find that he lost. If you just look at what he ran on when he stood for election, it was for peace. Comments even from Russia thought that, you know, maybe this would be a good idea. And then he turned completely the opposite direction. There are people that want him out. And I think this mobilization is a show of really how desperate things have become. And I mean, Ukraine had massed one of the biggest armies in Europe, and it did not do any good.
Go on, Jack, let's say, GG.
I think it's the last desperate measure because, you know, Ukraine it just cannot possibly win this war.
If you want to know more about what the future holds for Vladimir Zelensky and his powers in the presidential chair, go to our website, rt.com, to read more about this story and so much more. Russian Senator Alexei Pushkov has claimed that the Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico's shooter wasn't acting alone and that the gun in his hand was guided by ultra-liberal European media and politicians.
The radical liberal Slovak Centrula, fixated on supporting Ukraine and hating Fico, fired 5 shots at Robert Fico. He was the one pulling the trigger, but the gun was put in his hand by the ultra-liberal European media and politicians, who nurtured the ideology of hatred and extreme intolerance in Europe and turned it into a field of war against the new heretics who disagree with the dogmas of ultra-liberalism and Atlanticism.
Nowadays. 71-year-old Juraj Cintula shot the Slovak Prime Minister 5 times on May 15th. The country's deputy prime minister confirmed Fico's life was no longer in danger after he underwent a 5-hour surgery. Slovakia's interior minister also asserted the gunman was angered by the government's policies, especially the choice to stop arming Ukraine. And the former justice minister of Slovakia points the finger at the Soros Foundation and foreign NGOs for the assassination attempt.
Soros! Spell media that is sponsored by Soros Foundation and other NGOs from the public space, and the polarization of Slovak society will end within a week.
Veteran war correspondent Elijah Magnier says the Russian senator's suggestion that ultra-liberal European media and politicians are responsible for the attempted assassination of the Slovak leader has some truth to it.
I really tend to agree with him because the animosity against Russia, it doesn't come from last week or 2 weeks ago or whenever. It has started after the February 2022, when Russia was considered in terms of European approach not an enemy. And this situation has changed with the intention of the US to designate Russia as the enemy and to push Europe to align itself with the United States. Now, having done that, there is a need of justification to convince the European population. And for that, Russia needs to be demonized. And this is what the Americans have done. This is what mainstream media is very active since the February 2022.
You know, they were reporting
and still
on
active until today in doing exactly the same thing. There has been a sabotage in the heart of Europe of Nord Stream 2. Everybody close an eye, doesn't want to investigate.
Reporting on
And
British,
any act against Russia
a couple of
is
Brits
justified.
going over to fight for Russia and Ukraine.
North Korea has slammed the U.S.
Has
for
there
conducting nuclear
been any
tests that
Russians
threaten global stability and could
coming to
lead
fight?
to greater escalations.
For the Brits,
North Korea
or
will not
Yanks.
tolerate the creation of a strategic imbalance and security vacuum in the Korean peninsula, but will firmly defend its security, rights and interests through powerful deterrent action against the evolving nuclear threat from the US.
There's only one country that's ever used atomic bombs. That was the United States, that used nuclear weapons on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The people of Hiroshima spoke up in the aftermath of the recent provocative drills by the United States.
On behalf of the atomic-bombed city of Hiroshima, I vehemently protest and demand that all future nuclear tests be cancelled. I strongly urge the United States to reflect deeply on the horrific realities of what a single atomic bomb did to Hiroshima and the tragic experiences of the survivors.
The decried subcritical nuclear tests were done in Nevada. Here's how the U.S. National Nuclear Security Agency described them.
On the evening of May 14th, the U.S. Department of Energy's National Nuclear Security Administration successfully executed a subcritical experiment. NNSA relies on subcritical experiments to collect valuable information to support the safety, security, reliability, and effectiveness of America's nuclear warheads, without the use of nuclear explosive testing. The nuclear security enterprise will use the results of this experiment to improve our modeling and simulation capability, part of the science-based stockpile stewardship program that NNSA has led for over 30 years.
In 1992, the United States declared a moratorium on full-on nuclear tests with explosions. However, tests like the recent one, the provocative subcritical nuclear tests that flaunt nuclear prowess and demonstrate the ability to destroy millions of lives, have continued. The USA has never signed the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, and it claims that these recent subcritical tests are in full compliance with all international law. However, the context of the recent tests makes them a little bit more alarming. Let's recall how recently U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham defended the use of atomic bombs against Hiroshima and Nagasaki on the floor of the U.S. Congress.
Would you have supported dropping the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, General Brown, to end World War II?
Why not?
Well, Senator, I think it is based on the situation where the...
Well, we know. I mean, it's happened. We know. I'm not asking. They did it. Do you think that was disproportionate?
It was definitely...
Well, do you, in hindsight, do you think that was the right decision for America to drop 2 atomic bombs on the Japanese cities in question?
Well, I'll tell you, it stopped the World War.
Japanese officials were horrified by the rhetoric of Lindsey Graham, to say the least, and they come at a time when Western leaders say that threatening to bring nuclear weapons into the Ukraine conflict is simply fair game.
It's just reckless and irresponsible for the leader of a major nuclear-armed power to be saber-rattling the way that he is with respect to potential use for nuclear weapons. We're Obviously, we monitor this and have continued to monitor this very closely. I can tell you we've seen nothing, even despite the reckless rhetoric, that would cause us to change our strategic deterrent posture. And look, lastly, if Mr. Putin and Russian officials are worried about their troops in Ukraine getting hit with weapons from other countries, then the easiest thing to do is just take your troops and leave.
Nobody wins a nuclear war. That's a reality that has haunted the planet for decades. So with international tensions
and it's only
rising in a
9:30 in
number
the
of
morning.
theaters right now, you would think it's just common sense that you shouldn't be
9:30.
flaunting your nuclear arsenal at this moment. However, when met with criticism, U.S. media and U.S. leaders have an oft-used rebuttal. It's all Russia's fault. However, Russia has not engaged in the type of provocative drills we just saw in Nevada. Caleb Maupin, RT, New York.
Joe Altman, host of the Conservative Daily podcast, says Western leaders deliberately nurture violence as a tool to deal with global crises.
That's a very, very, very slippery slope. And we've been talking about slippery slopes for decades, not just related to nuclear bombs, but cutting off body parts from individuals, allowing open borders, creating environments where pedophilia can be normalized. I mean, creating entire environments where that slippery slope is allowed for the degradation of society, not just in the United States, but around the world.
Well,
and now
sounds
we're
like
talking about
James
nuclear
Goddard.
weapons as if that's a plausible solution to any
Illuminati,
conflict. And it
satanic
shows you
pedophiles.
how most people in most countries want to push towards peaceful resolutions. And yet our leaders, as they call us violent when we want to rise up to do things because they've done things to hurt the populace, are now saying it's okay, that they can use violence as a means to hurt other people as long as it doesn't involve them.
Sound
Yet as people,
like
we're expected
conspiracy
to
YouTuber,
be
doesn't he?
law-abiding and sit on the sidelines while they wreak havoc not just on their own country, but on countries around the world. We're dealing with an upside-down world, and frankly, I think the leadership in not just the United States but around the world is pretty pathetic, and this justification probably shows this alignment with the World Economic Forum and Soros and Yuval Noah Harari, just really, really bad people who have done really, really bad things around the world, and this is kind of them signaling that they're not done yet.
Just stay with RT International. Up next on the 360 View, the strain of U.S. relations with China. Bye-bye.
Well, let's see how Al Jazeera are meeting today's news cycle.
On Sunday, begin Pride West Bank. Janine, have you with us? This is I'm Cyril Vanier. It's good to have you with us. This is Al Jazeera, live from Doha. Also coming up, fighting in Jenin. Israeli forces kill at least 7 Palestinians in a refugee camp in the occupied West Bank.
Well, Gaza still exists.
And mourning in Iran. Funeral processions begin for the late President Ibrahim Raisi, who was killed in a helicopter crash.
I was going to say amazing, but it's not amazing. It's not even surprising.
The Republic of Congo will be reporting from the capital, Kinshasa.
How quickly a lot of the talking holds when it comes to news can just drop.
After more than 7 months of Israel's devastating war on Gaza, which has killed at least 35,000,
all sorts of things, just as it suits or it comes uncomfortable or they can't quite spin
criminal
it.
court has sought arrest warrants for Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his defense minister Yoav Gallant. They're accused of war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza. Netanyahu says it's a complete distortion of reality. The ICC prosecutor also wants arrest warrants for 3 Hamas leaders for the October 7th attack in southern Israel, a move that's been denounced by Hamas. Osama bin Javed begins our coverage.
Starving children is a crime. Killing civilians is a war crime, and willfully causing suffering is also a criminal act. Those are the top 3 reasons the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court has cited for requesting arrest warrants for the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant.
I have reasonable grounds to believe, on the basis of evidence collected and examined by my office, that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant bear criminal responsibility for the following international crimes committed on the territory of the State of Palestine.
Several Israeli ministers have denounced the allegations of war crimes and crimes against humanity. The foreign minister, Israel Katz, says it's a historic disgrace and that a special war room has been set up to counteract the decision. But not everyone agrees.
Israel will again protect itself with this wall of the whole world is anti-Semite and the whole world is against us, and it will unite again the
That's
Israelis
a Haratz. I'm pretty sure that's a Jewish outfit.
Even more nationalist wave, and everyone will feel so just and such a victim by this evil decision. I think it's a just decision.
The ICC prosecutor is also seeking arrest warrants for Hamas political and military leaders.
A Jewish person?
Haniyeh,
Agreeing with this?
Sinwar and Mohammed Dev.
He must be a self-hating anti-Semitic Jew.
That these three Hamas leaders are criminally responsible for the killing of Israeli civilians in attacks perpetrated by Hamas and other armed groups on the 7th of October 2023.
That was a good wee touch getting the Hamas folk involved in it as well.
Several months too late.
Kind of like,
rather than blaming the victim and the perpetrator, ICC should order the arrest of all
Islamophobes
officials who gave orders and the soldiers who carried out the crimes.
If we want to be honest, we should be looking at what it is that the government, the Israeli government, has been doing, the orders that it has issued to its soldiers, and it's issued orders to its soldiers.
She sounds American.
If this order is to have any credibility, it should be going after the people who are committing genocide, rather than just simply trying to play this
George
game of
Clooney's
both sides.
missus.
For months, the ICC prosecutor faced criticism as the carnage in Gaza unfolded.
George Clooney's missus has somehow got involved in all this.
Criticized what they saw as his inaction
She's a
to
lawyer
hold Israel accountable.
at the International Court.
Ceasefire. Ceasefire.
Israel's allies, including the United States,
I
also
know the
expressed
day,
anger
mate.
ahead of Monday's ICC announcement. Target Israel and we will target you, said a warning letter from a dozen US Republican senators. They threatened to cut funding and sanction ICC staff and their families. This is Gaza today. And the mere talk of arrest warrants is unlikely to have an immediate impact on a war which has killed more than 35,000 Palestinians and displaced millions more since October. Osama bin Javed, Al Jazeera.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government has banned Al Jazeera from reporting in Israel, so we are reporting from the Jordanian capital Amman, where Imran Khan is standing by. Imran, the Israeli Prime Minister is furious, which is not exactly a surprise, but what did he say in response to the request for an arrest warrant?
Well, Cyril, I could spend about an hour going not just through Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's reaction, but across the political spectrum. Everybody from Benny Gantz,
they're confusing the shit out of me.
Leader of the opposition,
They need to come up with
the far-right ministers. Everybody has reacted, but there does
some
seem
more
to be
creative,
one
different
key
names.
thing that's coming out, and this is what the PM himself had to say. This absurd and deceitful warrant of the prosecutor in The Hague is aimed not only at Israel's Prime Minister and Defense Minister, it's aimed against the entire state of Israel. And that's really the language that's coming through, not just from the political echelons, but in all of the editorial leaders in the newspaper, all of the commentators speaking on TV. This is actually in a very odd way uniting the state of Israel, because everybody believes that this isn't about individuals, not about Yoav, the defense minister, not about the prime minister, but this is an attack against Israel. The fact that they're calling it a false equivalence of our democratically elected political leaders with the terrorists of Hamas. That's another quote from an editorial that I read today. So this is really the reaction. It is, like you say, unsurprising, but it did take the Israeli political establishment by surprise. The news that there was this application for arrest warrants, they did know it was coming, but they didn't think that it was going to be so far-ranging. So in terms of reaction, like I say,
I'm pretty sure they've been bumping their gums.
It's now all about the response.
About
What
this
is
for
Israel
some
going to do
time
about
now.
this? Well, the first key thing it's doing is reaching out to all
Is
of its
ignore it.
allies, including people who are signatories to the ICC. Remember, Israel isn't a signatory, but it is taking this very seriously. One of the key places of support that they were looking for, and they got, was from US President Joe Biden, who said that the Israeli forces aren't committing a genocide in Gaza. And that's something, a message that they're really trying to push out there. But like I say, generally speaking, Israel is united in seeing this as an attack against their own sovereignty.
Imran, I just want to double check because I see you touching your earpiece. You can hear me, right?
Yes, I've got you. I've got you, sir.
Okay, I just needed to make sure. One thing that doesn't seem to be happening at all, doesn't even seem to be on the cards, on the horizon, or even the distant horizon, is any kind of change in the way Netanyahu chooses to prosecute this war, right? He's accused of starving Palestinians. He's accused of committing war crimes, crimes against humanity, along with his defense minister. What they did not say is, oh, we take at least some of this on board and we're going to
see if we have a nuclear war. There'll be a couple of things left on this planet. Cockroaches and that guy's hair.
Remember, every time there is a United Nations
he'll be gone, but that hair,
that will not move. The backing of the United States. So that's a very typical response. They just simply dismiss everything. Oftentimes they'll say the United Nations is simply anti-Israeli. Worse, they'll call it anti-Semitic. They can dismiss the UN Security Council resolutions. This is a little bit more difficult, but Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is using this tactic once again of just going after the organization rather than looking at what the organization has said and whether anything needs to change. They're very convinced, Israel is very convinced that it's going to fight the war the way possible. But there are divisions. Benny Gantz, member of the War Cabinet, Yoav Gallant, member of the War Cabinet, have been very critical of the Prime Minister of Israel because he simply doesn't have a plan for the day after. And that's something that's becoming increasingly more obvious.
Okay, Imran Khan, thank you very much for that reporting there from Amman, once again, because Israel shut down Al Jazeera within Israel. Thank you very much, Imran Khan there. Tariq Abu Azim reports now from central Gaza on the reaction from there.
Well, in fact, the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court has accused Hamas leaders, including Yahya Sinwar and Mohammed Daif, the main head official in the military wing of Hamas, alongside with Ismail Haniyeh, the political bureau chief of the movement, of committing, of overseeing crimes against Israeli communities on October the 7th, where more than 1,000 Israeli have been killed so far, with at least 250 others being taken captives inside the territory here. They had also called in a statement to the International Criminal Court to cancel this arrest warrants against its leaders, as they have been confirming and saying that the court is trying to equating between the victim and the executioner, in an attempt that Hamas is trying to say that the Israeli leaders are responsible for all kinds of massacres being committed inside the territory since October the 7th.
Israeli forces have killed at least 7 Palestinians during a military raid in the city of Jenin in the occupied West Bank. Among those killed include a teacher, a student, and a surgeon. At least 9 Palestinians have also been injured, 2 of whom are in serious condition. The military sent reinforcements to the area after special Israeli units infiltrated the city and the camp, where they were confronted by Palestinian fighters. Al Jazeera's Nida Ibrahim joins us now from Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. Nida, what more have you been able to find out about this Israeli raid on Jenin?
His hairdo would definitely survive a nuclear strike, wouldn't it?
Well, we know now that confrontations are still continuing in a certain area that has been surrounded by the Israeli forces, but the confrontations are going on between the Palestinian fighters and the Israeli forces who have raided the Jenin area and the Jenin refugee camp in the early hours of the morning. We're talking about 8 a.m. This is the time when Palestinians are going to their schools, to their work. This is why we've seen 2 Palestinians who were going to their work who have been killed. A doctor who has been mourned by the Palestinian Health Ministry as a surgeon in the hospital, as well as a teacher. We are also talking about other Palestinians who were killed. 7 of them, but at least 6 were identified, and according to the information we've gotten from the medical sources, 2 of them are minors under 18, and the injuries that have caused them to be killed were directed to the chest and the head. So we're talking about an intention to kill as far as Palestinians there are concerned. We've seen an Israeli statement from the Israeli
shot to the head usually
army
does it.
saying that they have operated on a group of what they call terrorists, but according to Palestinians who were there, the Palestinians who have been killed are all civilians. Some of them are even over the age of 55. So we're not talking about fighters at the moment, although we are seeing the confrontations going on. According to locals there, they say that a bulldozer has made its way inside the refugee camp. They believe that it's there to demolish the home of a Palestinian who has been earlier killed by the Israeli forces. We are anticipating this to continue for a while, and the situation is very tense at the moment. The only good news that we've gotten from there at the moment is that the children who were inside the schools who were caught in the fire were able to be safely evacuated to their families right now.
Nida Ibrahim reporting from Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. Thank you very much for that, Nida. The Jenin refugee camp has seen more Israeli military raids than anywhere else in the West Bank. For the thousands of children who call it home, that means...
Well, they do call us, what is it, nation of dog lovers, something like that. It's amazing how animals come part of their family, man.
They take turns putting it on, emulating their heroes, Palestinian fighters killed by Israeli soldiers.
There's the next generation of martyrs.
To mimic adults, recreating the things they see every day. But in the occupied West Bank, what passes for normal, seen through the eyes of its children, can seem morbid.
We are playing Israelis and Arabs. The details of the game are: the occupation army raids Arabs. Some of us act as the soldiers and others are fighters. Someone gets wounded, the army comes in and kills him. Then they storm the house, and then there are clashes.
Scenarios acted out against a backdrop that is all too real. The panic of running battles.
Kids doing that in this country would get an armed response unit and a couple of fucking bullets to the head.
Shields or taken prisoner by Israeli troops. They take cover, regroup, and prepare for the next round. With toys, often cobbled together from scraps, they're prized possessions. The way they move is almost tactical. After all, what other children learn from movies, these youngsters have learned from real life.
Woohoo! There's the next generation of fighters.
In the aftermath of Israeli raids.
They talk about war, about the incursions. They want to protest and fight. They are very influenced by whatever happens around them. They see young people being killed, targeted in airstrikes, and they ask, why should we have to live like this? We must defend ourselves.
Psychologists say this is a form of healing, playing pretend war to cope with the trauma of living in a real one.
Children use playing for different things. First of all, just to able to control situations where they feel they are unable to control, because children normally feel helpless comparing to their parents. They're expressing what they're seeing and what they're suffering, because even if they're laughing, it's part of their internal life.
The old one looks a fighting age.
And sometimes they feel their parents or the adults around them who are supposed to provide them with protection are helpless also, or unable to protect them.
It is about processing pain and having some agency in their own lives. Therapists say their behavior is not necessarily violent. Their circumstances are. But in their games, they are free. Because in the imagination of Palestinian children, they get to decide who wins. Zain Basravi, Al Jazeera, Ramallah, the occupied West Bank, Palestine.
Still ahead on Al Jazeera, time runs out on President Volodymyr Zelensky's
Get you
term in
right at the
office,
heartstrings,
but
that
there
one,
won't be
man.
any election in the near future.
Beautiful.
Hey there, we're going to power up some
Right, Microsoft's new AI computers. Please wake me up when the machines have taken over. Everything I'm seeing right now, if you think about it logically, there is no intelligence, there's no artificial intelligence behind very smart algorithms. I just don't see it that way.
Live from London, this is BBC News.
Thank
the BBC
you.
hears accusations of Israeli mistreatment of Palestinian detainees from Gaza. One medic says it announced to torture. The funeral procession begins for Iran's President Raisi, who was killed in a helicopter crash on Sunday. This is Tabriz, a city near to where the crash happened. Thousands are paying their respects. The UK government's expected to outline plans for a compensation scheme for victims of the NHS contaminated blood scandal.
That's what's missing from the press TVs and Al Jazeera and whatnot, RTs. Press TV, for obvious reasons, going balls out with the coverage of the time we I'll try and get the top of the hour news from Sky. I think I'm going to lead with this blood scandal.
Hello, I'm Sarah Campbell. We start with a special report from Israel, where medical workers have told the BBC that Palestinian detainees from Gaza are routinely kept shackled to hospital beds, blindfolded, sometimes naked, and forced to wear nappies, a practice one medic said amounted to torture. Israel's army said in response that handcuffing of detainees in the Sde Tayman military hospital was carried out in cases where the security risk requires it, and that nappies were used only for those who've undergone medical procedures. There are some upsetting details in this report from our correspondent, Lucy Williamson.
Go on.
Sufyan Abu Salah survived months of war unscathed. He left military detention in Israel, permanently disabled. A taxi driver from Khan Yunis.
I mean, even the wee boys playing army in Gaza fucking weren't wearing nappies.
Soured by sadness.
My leg got infected and turned blue and soft as a sponge. After 7 days, they took me to the military hospital.
Right, that's on the BBC iPlayer if you want to go.
At the Sde Tayman military base.
Fill yourself in with these fucking...
One senior med...
You need everything. It's dehumanization of them.
Well,
the army told us that the need to handcuff detainees and those who couldn't walk, fighters, alongside their Israeli victims. Many current detainees are released without charge, but the complex feelings of some medics remain. 2 medics told us painkillers had been withheld, causing what one described as an unacceptable amount of pain. This man, who we're calling Yoni, described a case he said took place in a public civilian hospital. His words have been voiced by an actor.
I have knowledge of one case where the painkillers were used selectively during a procedure. If you put together that someone is undergoing an invasive procedure which involves even incisions, and the patient doesn't know about that and is blindfolded, then the line between treatment and assault thins out.
Treating Gazan captives on military sites was meant to resolve doctors' ethical dilemmas. But those dilemmas remain. The moment our hospital at Sde Tayman closes, one told me,
sweet human beings are capable of...
Lucy Williamson, BBC News, Jerusalem.
You've been trained
let's go live now to Jerusalem and our
anybody, a
Dan
demographic,
Johnson. Hello
Celtic
to you, Dan. Let's talk first of all about the news from the International Criminal Court. Of course,
so
they've talked about the fact that they are looking into issuing arrest warrants for the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, and also Yoav Gallant. I'm just looking at wires now, and Mr. Gallant has
Arrest
just
warrants
issued a statement saying he's
for
accusing the
Israel and
ICC
Hamas
prosecutor of
leaders.
trying to deny the Israeli right to self-defense and to recover hostages. So clearly a very strong response from Israel to this news from the ICC.
Yes, a strong response, a furious response, and it is in the main a united response. Whereas in the last week we've been seeing divisions opening up between Benjamin Netanyahu, his defence secretary, and the other member of his war cabinet, we are now seeing them uniting in condemnation of this move by the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court to press charges, to issue arrest warrants for Mr. Netanyahu and Mr. Gallant. The Prime Minister last night described this as a moral outrage of historic proportions. He said it would cast an everlasting mark of shame on the International Court. Describing the prosecutor, Mr. Khan, he said, creates a twisted and false moral equivalence between the leaders of Israel and the henchmen of Hamas, something that sets a dangerous precedent that undermines every democracy's right to defend itself against terror organisations. He's made clear that he believes the International Criminal Court has no jurisdiction over Israel. Israel is not signed up to the International Criminal Court, but the court does recognise the state of Palestine. So it seems even if Israelis are going to challenge this on the basis of lack of jurisdiction, the court has already ruled that matters affecting the Palestinian people do come within its remit. I think what we will see is a concerted attempt to challenge the International Criminal Court's legitimacy and to question its approach here. And we've already seen the United States President Joe Biden saying this is an outrageous move. The US is not signed
challenge
up to
the
International
legitimacy
Court, but even those
of
who
funny
are
men
have questioned
and
this
funny
as well. The word
costumes,
from a
lording
British
it over
spokesman was
people,
that this was unhelpful
typically
at the
using
moment. And there is real
the
outrage
secret
at
dude,
the
magic man in the
perceived moral
sky
equivalence
as
of bringing
justification
an arrest warrant against Benjamin
to lock
Netanyahu
you up,
at the same
fine
time
you,
as the top leaders
brand
of
you
Hamas,
X,
something that
brand
they
you
say they
Y.
will challenge, they will question, they will ignore. But the reality will be, if these arrest warrants are issued, Benjamin Netanyahu could be at risk of arrest visiting any country that is signed up to the International Criminal Court. That includes Britain. What would Britain do in that instance if Benjamin Netanyahu chose to visit? Will he restrict his travel plans if that happens? These are major issues, big questions for the future, which could possibly test international relations and the upholding of international law, justice and accountability.
For the moment, Dan Johnson in Jerusalem. Thank you. Now let's move to Iran, where funeral ceremonies for the president, Ebrahim Raisi, are getting underway. This, of course, after his body was recovered on Monday from the wreckage of a helicopter crash. Events will take place across the country before he is buried. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, will preside over the main ceremony. Rescue teams found no survivors from the crash, which happened on Sunday as Mr. Raisi was flying back from a trip to Iran's northern neighbour.
Best TV usually goes balls out
Iranian
with
foreign
them
minister was
stuff,
also
so
killed.
I want to see
The
them.
cause of the crash has not
Point the
yet
finger at
been
Israel.
established.
Well,
We're
suppose
with
they have
Kazra
been
Naji, BBC Persian special
talking about it.
correspondent. Thank you for joining us in the studio.
It's the
here.
fault of the
Kazra, just
West
take us
for
through
sanctions
events, 5 days of mourning
against the aeroplane
announced by the
parts,
supreme leader,
helicopter
and
parts.
they are very much underway, as we can see from our live pictures.
That's right. What we're seeing today is a send-off, an informal funeral for the 8 people who died in this incident, including President Raisi and his foreign minister, Mr. Hussein Amir Abdullahian. We saw crowds of people in the streets of Tabriz, which is the center, capital of the eastern Azerbaijan province of Iran in northwest Iran.
And of course, the significance being that they were on their way to that city when this accident, when the helicopter crashed.
That's right. And the site of the crash is about 100 kilometers north of the city. So what we've seen is a big truck, open truck today, driving amongst the crowd today in the city center, carrying the coffins of the president and the foreign minister and others who were killed. And we saw people throwing flowers.
Can you imagine if the
procession and the truck and
international
the
court had like any
the
real
ceremony
power?
has been going on for
Who
some
would they
time.
be?
Some 2 hours,
Cheering?
2.5 hours. probably
Hitler would be in jail.
I'm
pretty sure a few Chinese dudes would be in jail.
Crowd. We talk, from what I've seen on the Iranian state television's coverage, we're talking about probably 10,000 people probing them and still.
Of the NHS contaminated.
So, Sky are just going to be pounding home this blood thing and try and say Gaza is least amount of times as they possibly
deliberately
can.
Destroyed and others going missing. Sir Brian Langstaff concluded that the failure.
And the whitewash continues. Nobody asks the questions. How many inquiries? And how much money, how many inquiries for things where there's nobody going to be held accountable because the inquiries are only allowed to happen and they take so long, 30, 40 years afterwards? Well, I think it was in the 80s, wasn't it? Was it the late 70s, 80s, or was it just the 80s? 40 odd year ago, man. And now somebody who had nothing to do with it, who isn't going to be in power for more than a couple of months more, is now coming out and saying, sorry, job's a good one, little man. I'm going to retire. I'm pretty sure the British people will be like nodding dogs and just go along with this because you have no other option. Or there's no other option presented to you. This is nothing more than political theatre to make it look like something's happening. Nobody's addressing, number one, the money, the time, the people that are doing it's done the inquiry. They came out and says that they were using little babies and all that as guinea pigs, deliberately jagging them up with fucking HIV and what was the other one? HIV and something else, I can't remember.
Falls apart. I want to have more time
deliberately
to go and digest that.
Deliberately.
Goes back to instances that.
So, call me crazy to dare suggest this might not be the first time that they've conducted live clinical trials on the great unwashed. These crackpot doctors lording it over everybody who are Machiavellian doctors. They see what some of them would have seen what they done back then is worth it in the long run to get the data back.
I feel absolutely ashamed as well of how people were treated, and I feel profoundly shocked that in our country we find ourselves in a situation again. You look at Horizon, you look at Hillsborough, that people have not only been the victims of wrongdoing, of error, of delay, but worse still, it takes them years of fighting and campaigning to get justice.
Just like this. Oh, God. This has been known about for ages. It could have been took seriously a long time ago, and maybe some people could be held
feeling the heat politically over this today.
Well, both have apologised. You saw Mel Stride there talking about Ken Clarke as he was singled out in the report and saying he has questions to answer, which is significant. Whether those questions will be looked at in the weeks or months going ahead, we'll have to see. But also successively,
who was in charge of the Jimmy Savile stuff? Keir Starmer. Who was in charge of
that this morning?
That's another sir that was in charge of covering up this shit show. The infected blood, the Horizon thing. Which sir are
quick enough that could have been done a
servant of the system was put in charge of that whitewash.
So while we will get a compensation package today, I think that is something that ministers will have to answer, why this has taken so long.
Serena, thanks very much. Ashish, let's just bring you in.
I wonder. I have no idea.
Ashish,
why would it possibly take so long?
Who've been affected, and we heard so many of their stories yesterday. They've waited such a long time for compensation, many of them. What are we going to hear today in Parliament? Are we going to hear numbers? Are we going to hear time frame?
I expect we will probably hear both, given that damning report delivered by
Sir Brian, yesterday. I know that
does anybody
John Glenn
remember
spoke to a lot
what
of the
happened with the
campaigners
Hillsborough inquiry?
and the
What about that
infected
Horizon
and
one?
unaffected in the lead up to the publication of the inquiry. So over the past few weeks, he's been speaking to the people involved with this campaign. They came away from the meetings, Jane, with a degree of optimism, a degree of hope, and I got a sense from speaking to them that they were saying John Glenn, as the Paymaster General, got it. He understood their situation and he was going to make things right. He has also invited those same people to the Commons this afternoon when he delivers his compensation package.
The Iranian
I'm only guessing now, but I don't think you would invite the people that you are responding to listen to you deliver a compensation package.
Is he still alive?
Unless you thought that was going to
no
be a good compensation package and they would be
it.
happy with it. I mean, if you read between the lines, all the indications are that he's inviting campaigners, those infected and affected, to the Commons to listen to him, to deliver their compensation package. That tells me that the Prime Minister, the Chancellor and John Glenn, the Paymaster General, have agreed a substantial compensation package. And I think the Prime Minister alluded to that as much yesterday in the Commons, saying that we will fully meet expectations. And Jeremy Hunt's been talking about it over the last few days. So we expect a pretty big compensation package.
Life is
People are
no longer
putting numbers next to it, something that we're £10 billion.
Life's no longer in danger.
To right all the wrongs over the past 40 years, but it will be a good place to start.
Ashish and Serena, thank you both very much. The US President Joe Biden says Israeli forces are not committing genocide in Gaza. Talking at a Jewish-American event at the White House, he denounced the International Criminal Court's chief prosecutor, Karim Khan, for requesting arrest warrants for the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his defence chief. The prosecutor is also pursuing Hamas's leaders for alleged war crimes.
We reject the ICC's application for arrest warrants against Israeli leaders. Whatever these warrants may imply, there is no equivalence between Israel and Hamas. And it's clear Israel wants to do all it can to ensure civilian protection. But let me be clear. Contrary to allegations against Israel made by the International Court of Justice, what's happening is not genocide. We reject that. We're going to always stand with Israel.
Some people feel differently, my man. Some people feel differently.
Well, Sky's Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle is live from Jerusalem. Alistair, will yesterday's statement change anything on the ground, do you think?
Well, we don't know. It might persuade Netanyahu to change course in Gaza. He might do the opposite and decide to double down and to defy the International Criminal Court, particularly if he feels that he has the support of the United States and other countries. Germany as well has used that criticism of the ICC that Biden did there, that they have made an equivalency between Israel's leaders and
well, that's the
Hamas.
party line.
That's
going to be the meme. That's going to be
about the accusations of genocide.
State of Israel. We've already heard that more than one time. State of Israel is nowhere near the state. The democratic state of Israel isn't the same as a terrorist organisation. Nobody's saying they're the same.
Today,
like both entities
defense minister, who's
carrying out war crimes. I'm pretty sure that is the argument.
Arrest warrant. This is what he's had to say in defence and in criticism of the court. He says, as Minister of Defence, I support and strengthen the IDF soldiers who fight to defend the people of Israel and fulfil the right and deep obligation to defend ourselves on our own. International Criminal Court prosecutor Karim Khan's attempts to overturn the creation will not succeed. The prosecutor's parallel between the terrorist organisation Hamas and the State of Israel is despicable and disgusting. He goes on to say the State of Israel is not a party to the court and does not recognise its authorities. There's two things, three things that struck me about Gallant's statement. Firstly, and I don't know whether it's deliberate or whether I'm reading too much into it, he makes no mention of Netanyahu in his statement, and we know that the two politicians are not on best terms at the moment. Secondly, he defends the IDF and IDF commanders operating on the ground. It was very notable that the ICC is not seeking arrest warrants against any IDF commanders. It is going instead for the politicians. And thirdly, he speaks
can't really blame the
about
soldiers for
Israel's
doing their
right
job,
to
man.
defend itself. But actually, Karim Khan, in his submission, agrees with that. He's taking issue
Chicken
with
and
the
rice
way
sounds
Israel
nice,
has
mate.
gone about doing that, and specifically when it comes to Netanyahu and Gallant, what he accuses Israel of doing is denying humanitarian aid for the people of Gaza. And I'm sure the ICC will refer back to comments made by the likes of Yoav Gallant, for example, on October the 9th, 2 days after the terror attacks, when he said he's ordered a complete siege of Gaza. There'll be no fuel, no food, no electricity, everything is closed. And that is the sort of evidence that will be presented to the court. But Israeli leaders, although they say they don't recognise the authority of the court, are clearly rattled.
Alistair, thanks very much. Funeral proceedings have begun in Iran for
I'm pretty
President
sure stuff
Ebrahim
like this has
Raisi, who
happened
was killed
before.
in a helicopter crash along with the country's foreign minister. Thousands of mourners are gathering on the streets. The ceremonies take place
Touch
over
on the
next 3
ICC,
days.
but
Some are
haven't
carrying
touched
flags
on
or photos of Raisi as chanting is
the
played over
deaths in
speakers.
Israel.
But others in the country say they're celebrating the death
Gaza.
of the head of state, nicknamed the Butcher of Tehran, for his crackdown on protests. Our international correspondent Alex Rossi
I know,
joins
weird.
me now. And
I
Alex,
thought
we've
he
talked a lot
was the
about
butcher because he
international
cracked down on
reaction to
women
his death. But how
letting their hair
complex
down or something.
is the reaction inside Iran?
Well, it's very difficult to say exactly what is going on inside Iran, Jane, because it's a fairly opaque political system. You can see, though, on the streets of Tabriz, this is what the regime wants to show, an outpouring of grief for the president and the foreign minister
That's what the
of
regime
Iran. But
wants to show.
You know, his death is being celebrated by many people inside the country.
That's what the
who see
regime
him
wants
as
to
part of
show.
a corrupt,
Why the
clerical,
fuck is Sky News got it on?
Regime. It was really interesting after news circulated
You know.
that the crash had happened. Fireworks were let off across a few Iranian cities, apparently in celebration. There've been plenty of memes on social media as well. And it doesn't really matter what generation of Iranian
war.
you are, whether
Then
you're
there's
older or
meme
whether you're younger,
wars.
you see him really as a man with blood on his hands, or many Iranians do, although clearly from these pictures there are supporters as well, those people who are probably part of the regime in some shape or form. That's because in the 1980s he oversaw many executions of prisoners of conscience, thousands of people put to death.
People
and
loyal
more
to Britain
recently, mass
and
protests
British
that last in
Petroleum.
2022 after Mahsa Amini died after she was detained for allegedly wearing a hijab too loosely. Protests on the streets there. Hundreds of people killed, many
Allegedly.
people arrested as well. So there'll be lots of people looking at this, celebrating, as well, of course, as the mourning. In terms of the kind of public demonstrations for him, you're seeing the funeral processions in Tabriz. This is the closest city to where the crash happened. It'll then move to Qom, which is a religious city where many of the clerics have got their religious training. And then tomorrow there will be a kind of big set-piece funeral ceremony where the Ayatollah Khamenei will say prayers, and he will be buried on Thursday in Mashhad, which is his hometown. So that's the kind of choreography of it. Underpinning all of this, of course, the regime wants to project stability.
The choreography,
and
as
also the
opposed
message
to
that
all
really
these
nothing will change. This is
grassroots
really about continuity
celebrations
as far
of
as
the
they're concerned,
king and the
even
queen
though
back in the day.
the president and the foreign minister have been killed in unforeseen circumstances.
Just hilarious.
Alex, thank you.
Unforeseen circumstances, right?
Let's bring you some of the day's other news now. And Rishi Sunak's in Vienna, where he and the Austrian Chancellor Karl Nehammer committed to working together to tackle migration. The government's also announced an extra £25 million to the National Crime Agency to help fight people smuggling gangs.
And in our joint statement today, we've committed to deepening our cooperation to end this vile trade. And what both of us agree is that business as usual won't solve this problem. We have to think creatively. We have to pursue new ideas, new solutions and deterrence, removals to safe third countries, like the UK's pioneering Rwanda scheme. And as Carl said, it's increasingly clear that many other countries now agree that that is the approach that is required. Bold, novel, looking at safe country partnerships.
Yeah, policies in a fucking
Police are
chicken
continuing
soup.
to investigate after a
That's what
woman
we
in her
need.
50s was mauled to death by her 2 XL bully dogs.
When I woke up this morning and I was like,
Hornchurch
soon
in
can you
East
get
London.
a chicken soup
Both
on?
dogs had been
And then
registered
I'll
with
be able
new
to,
laws that came in earlier this year.
like your novel
Met Police
approach.
said in a statement the woman was treated by medics from London Ambulance Service, but sadly she was pronounced
Why
dead
is this
at the
happening so
scene
much? Well,
due to the threat
in fact,
posed. Armed
is it
officers
happening
attended. After
so
assessing
much,
the situation,
or
officers
is
were
it just
able to
getting
safely
reported on
seize 2
more
dogs.
than most? It's like knife crime, you know. Knife crime
England manager
happens
Gareth
all the
Southgate is
fucking
expected
time.
to name his
but the-
provisional squad
but
for
the
the
news
upcoming Euros this
report
lunchtime.
on
It's thought he'll pick 30 players
ones that are
before
they
whittling the
deem
side down to
as newsworthy.
26. There are questions about whether
Whether it's
Manchester
just for the
United's Marcus
titillation,
Rashford
a
will be
zombie
included.
knife, or to politically
Syria's
smear
First Lady
somebody.
has been diagnosed with leukemia. The announcement was made by the Syrian president and says Asma al-Assad is to undergo special treatment
Fucking Syrian
that will
woman
require her to isolate and therefore step away from public
Thinking about that
engagement.
Syrian girl
The
from back in the
announcement
day,
comes almost
who was
5
on
years after she announced
RT
she'd
or
fully
Press
recovered
TV
from
the
breast
other day.
cancer. You're watching Sky News Today. Coming up, as the world's top war crimes court seeks arrest for warrants for the Israeli Prime Minister and the leaders of Hamas, we'll assess how it could affect a possible ceasefire. Plus, we'll have an extended report on the cost of going green and the communities fearing that they will pay for the policies.
It's a pretty cool jacket.
I'm Dan Whitehead and I'm Sky's West of England correspondent.
I'm Katie Spencer and I'm Sky News' arts and entertainment correspondent. We help you to understand the world with us.
I'm Adam Parsons, I'm Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels. We take you to the heart of stories that shape our world.
I'm Lisa Dowd and I'm one of Sky's Midlands correspondents. Where it's
Aye, helping you understand the world. What is it to understand? Is this cotton picking competition or something? What the hell are they doing? Plastic buns? Is that food? They recovered from the plague.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls.
Pure dead brilliant.
Call so seriously they actually send an army.
Right, so let's have a wee look and see what the French are saying first of all, because let's see if they touch on that New Caledonia thing. That's out in the Pacific. Right, what am I looking for here? 20 minutes. I think that's it there. If it works.
Election season in next year, Talking Europe, and also talk about political parties. Countries. We'll look at the political powerhouses in the EU, and also talk about groups of countries and regions.
Picture of a woman. She must be the Queen of the European Union.
Europe on France 24.
Programs including Talking Europe and The Observers.
That's
First
as
of all,
bad
though,
as-
is today's main headlines. The first ever trial
Same
here
as
in
having
France into
pictures
the
of the
crimes
Queen
of
or the King.
Syria's regime is opening here in Paris. 3 high-ranking officials suspected of having played a role in the deaths of 2 French Syrians being tried in absentia for complicity in crimes against humanity. We'll hear from our reporter who's at the trial for us in just a moment. Confusion as to whether the main airport on New Caledonia, the French territory in the South Pacific, is opening today or not. Australia and New Zealand sending planes to pick up stranded nationals, but the airport's operators saying it will remain closed now until Saturday morning. And the Russian military says it's taken full control of the settlement of Bilohorivka in Ukraine's Luhansk region. Kyiv saying fighting is still going on in the area, and that 3 other attacks nearby have been repelled.
Didn't hear much about the actual boots on the ground in
So the first ever trial here in France into the crimes of Bashar al-Assad's regime is opening here in Paris today. 3 high-ranking Syrian officials suspected of having played a role in the deaths of 2 French Syrians are being tried in absentia for complicity in crimes against humanity. All 3 are the targets of international arrest warrants. James Andre spoke to him a little earlier. He was outside the court for us.
I thought Syria
These 3 men are high-ranking officials within the Syrian security apparatus under Bashar al-Assad. The first one, his name is Ali Mamlouk. Now, he was the head of the National Security Bureau in charge of all intelligence services across the country. The second is Jamil Hassan. Now, he was the head of Air Force Intelligence. And the third is Salam Mahmoud. He is the head of the Investigations Bureau of the Syrian Air Force Intelligence Service. Now, these 3 men are being tried here in absentia for the arrest, subsequent torture and death.
I understand why it's popping up on France 24, because it's happening in France.
2 Franco-Syrians who were arrested in November 2013, taken to Medzeh Airport, a place that became infamous for being a place of detention and torture of opponents to Bashar al-Assad's regime. And there, well, they simply disappeared and, well, death certificates were given to their families in the years following. Nobody ever had any more news about them. But indeed, there is documentation, there are witnesses to what happened, and this is what's going to be tried here. Subsequently to their disparition, well, the regime or the officials in question confiscated the family's home, kicking out Mazen's wife and his daughter, and indeed took the property. So these are the reasons why these men are tried here. And as you said, yes, they are tried for complicity in crimes against humanity and complicity in war crimes.
James, as we said, they're all being tried in absentia. Do we know exactly where they are? And in theory, could they actually face some consequences because of this?
Now, no, we do not know where they are. They're indeed tried in absentia, but yes, there will be consequences, simply because, first of all, well, if indeed they are condemned, then there will be an international arrest warrant with Interpol, so that means that will impair their capacity to travel in various countries across the world. It means that they will be arrested if they set foot on the soil of various countries. Also, it is a strong signal when it comes to the political situation of Syria at a time where many countries are normalizing with Bashar al-Assad's regime in the wake of what happened in the Syrian war. Well, this goes to show that indeed those who committed crimes and atrocities will still be prosecuted and indeed investigated. So this is very much the signal that is being
they don't know where they
are.
are.
Impunity when it comes to crimes against humanity and crimes that took place during the Syrian war. And of course, if they were to be arrested,
this was a French court.
They would be arrested, but also, well, there would be a new trial that would define what actual prison times or sentences could be handed down to them.
James Andre there at the court talking to me a short while ago. Now, the first evacuation flights had been due to take place today to extradite tourists trapped in New Caledonia. That's the French territory in the South Pacific. Both the Australian and New Zealand governments sending planes to evacuate their nationals. But we've been hearing now from the airport's operators saying it will remain closed until Saturday morning. So a confusing situation there. It comes as the region remains at a standstill after a week of rioting, despite the arrival of thousands of French reinforcements to stabilise the situation. Oliver Farry has the latest.
From the sky over Noumea can be seen numerous columns of smoke.
That's yet another example
a sign that the
of
tensions continue.
How colonialism
Rioters
never
in
really
New
ended.
Caledonia
It was
have
just
targeted the
kind of
island's economic
rebranded.
core. This transport company's premises have been set alight, and a car showroom completely burned out. In the north of the city, pro-independence activists still have roadblocks mounted. On this road, there's no way through.
We're out here this morning having a moment of reflection, just to pay homage to our dead, all our innocent brothers who've fallen. Our fight is a legitimate one. We're just saying, don't take away our benefits.
At this roundabout, traffic is let through, though there is a dissuasive roadblock. But many roads remain impassable. Security forces are gradually clearing the main thoroughfares. A military convoy advances slowly to reopen this dual carriageway. Police are protecting strategic bridges like this one. And for the first time since the start of the unrest, there are signs that things are calming down. In the Magenta neighbourhood in the north of Noumea, one of the worst affected, white flags have gone up. Protesters are themselves clearing the streets of burned out cars. Young people here want to show they intend to bring an end to the violence.
For 6 days now, our parents haven't been able to sleep, so we want to stop all this. And too many people have died, so we have decided to stop.
Despite 29 arrests on Monday, France's Interior Ministry says things have quietened down in New Caledonia.
And what is it they say? That isn't the Commonwealth that Britain's empire rebranded as. It's French's overseas territories.
The airport was one of the first sites to be attacked on the 29th of February when a fresh storm of gang violence erupted in the Haitian capital. Gangs do still control 80% of Port-au-Prince. Let's have a listen now to some relieved Haitians.
There are thousands of people who wanted to travel for a certain time who couldn't. I have my tent, which I had to live in for more than 3 months. Many people were suffering. We are satisfied and waited a long time.
It is with a heart filled with joy that I say thank you to God and to all
Everybody
the
speaking
authorities
Haitian,
who worked to
somebody
reopen
French
the
there.
airport, who offered me the opportunity to take the risk of travelling to Cap Haitien. I thank God. Thank you.
I am traveling due to the unrest. I need some calm so I can get some rest, take a break in another environment. If I was safe here, I wouldn't be going anywhere else. I don't like to travel. At my age, I can't stand cold weather.
The Russian military says it's taken full control of the settlement of Belorivka in Ukraine's Luhansk region. Kyiv saying fighting is still going on in the area and that 3 attacks in the nearby Siversk sector have also been repelled. Meanwhile, fighting still ongoing as well in the border town of Vovchansk in northeastern Kharkiv in the face of what's been described as a relentless Russian offensive. Charlotte Hughes brings us the latest.
Sort of trying to grab as much as they can before all that ammunition and that
Ukrainian
arrives.
soldiers are attempting to hold off Russian advances. Ukrainians claim they still control around 60% of the town. Moscow's forces have made their largest territorial gains in 18 months since they launched a ground assault in the northeastern Kharkiv region and opened up a new front. On Tuesday, President Zelensky warned that Kyiv needs more air defences in order to hold the front line.
Russian murderers are actively using guided aerial bombs in the area of Chasiv Yar, in the Pokrovsk sector, in the area of Lipsy in the Kharkiv region, and in other combat areas. This brings us back again and again to the need for air defense, for additional defense systems that could significantly mitigate the difficulties for our warriors and the threat to our cities and communities.
Air defense systems that could protect residents from aerial attacks. This 22-year-old woman was injured when a missile struck the outskirts of Kharkiv. Not long after, there was a second explosion.
I was miraculously alive. Everyone around me within 5 meters died. And the doctor who came to me put a tourniquet on my leg. Then we were hit a second time, and his arm was torn off.
Some of that weird conflicts.
Kharkiv's prosecutor's office accused Russian forces of using the double strike to target civilians and then target rescue teams who respond to the initial incident.
A double tap.
Moscow has
common military tactic.
Using so-called double tap attacks, but insists it only aims to strike military infrastructure. Ukraine, meanwhile, says it is gathering evidence of war crimes in the region.
Now, here in France, commuters in the Paris region are likely having a pretty tough
Could
time
have
out
played,
today. Staff of the
they used war
SNCF
crimes
National Railway Company
as a
began
word,
strike
as a
affecting
trigger word for a
suburban
drinking
lines.
game this
They're
morning.
walking off the job to demand a bonus
Easy
for
peasy.
working during the Paris Summer Olympics. Police
Everybody's
unions
having any
have
bit of
already
war crime
won
action
Olympic
this
bonuses,
morning.
as have Paris Metro or subway workers. Brian Quinn reports.
At this train station near the Chateau de Versailles, no service Tuesday, as across the Paris region, workers for the SNCF National Rail Company go on strike. Rail workers are demanding special Olympics bonuses that have already been approved for other sectors. Police officers working this summer will get up to €1,900 pre-tax, as will garbage collectors. Metro drivers will collect up to 25.
It's always some of them eerie, and interestingly eerie to just see the very similarities, sometimes identical stuff going on in France to the UK. The UK and Austria, they're all worried about brown people in boats. America, they're worried about brown Mexicans across the border. And in the UK, especially down south on the trains, there's been hundreds of
Strike
strikes and all
notices
that
have been
recently.
submitted. Clearly, unions are putting pressure on the government. They're saying, Mr. Minister, everything will go fine. You just need to spend some money.
SNCF executives say negotiations are ongoing.
Now then, it has been World Bee Day, designed to acknowledge the vital role bees play in sustaining Earth's
I thought he was talking about something that cleans your ass. A bee day.
ecosystems. But
Yeah, I
also
love bees.
Then she's wrecked her house. Oh, for
Okay, slaves, go and buy some more honey.
Pro-EU parties in Ireland.
Right, let's see what the Germans are saying to it.
No rainforest was cleared for the purpose of cultivation after the year 2021. But how will these rules be enforced? Verifying
Go on, go on, go on, go on. We countdown to
This is DW News coming to you live from Berlin. The German foreign minister in Ukraine, Annalena Baerbock, arrives in Kyiv by train on a visit previously unannounced for security reasons. It's the latest in a series of demonstrations of support for Ukraine from Western officials. Also coming up, Iran is holding funeral services for President Ibrahim Raisi and other top officials who died in a helicopter crash on Sunday. We'll hear global reaction to Raisi's death. Hello, I'm Terry Martin. Good to have you with us. We begin with breaking news from Ukraine. Germany's Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock has arrived in Kyiv for an unannounced visit. It's her 7th trip since the start of the full-scale Russian invasion in 2022, and she's used it to call for more international support to help protect Ukraine against Russian airstrikes.
You know,
the visit is a
I
display of solidarity and comes at a difficult moment
in
for
German
Ukraine,
politics.
with Russian forces advancing on the eastern front
Merkel still a
line.
bit?
They've taken control of parts of the Luhansk region, and Ukraine's army is battling to defend the northeastern city of Kharkiv. Well, DW correspondent Max Chanda is in Kharkiv. He told us about what Ukraine expects from the German foreign minister's visit.
Right, so first and foremost, in general, what Ukraine is asking the West, and
From
including
watching
Germany,
this
is
in the
more weapons, different kinds of weapon
24, you
systems,
can see that
including medium and long-range weapons that
the
can
European
be used
Union,
to strike within
which
occupied
these are
territory and also
representatives
disrupt
of,
Russian supply
are
lines.
all in on
In
Kiev.
situations such as what we're seeing in the north of the Kharkiv region right now, with a new Russian offensive opened. In addition to that, while speaking to soldiers here on the ground in the Kharkiv regions, what they've been telling us, they want to be able to use these Western weapons to their full capacity, meaning being able to strike within Russian territory. Russia at the moment is able to pull together troops on the other side of the border, and all Ukraine can do is attack with Soviet-made weapons or weapons of their own production. And in addition to this situation, what Ukraine direly needs at the moment is air defense systems. Ukrainian president said recently that Ukraine at the moment only has a quarter of what is needed to cover their airspace, and this is something that German Foreign Minister Baerbock, when she arrived in Kiev, also renewed her promises to a joint mechanism to bring more air defense systems to Ukraine.
And Max has been reporting from Kharkiv. People there in Ukraine's second-largest city have grown accustomed to life under Russian attacks, from missiles and drone strikes to the recent use of so-called glide bombs. Those who remain in Kharkiv are searching for new means to go on with their lives. Max's report on Ukraine's first underground school starts now.
It's the first day of school for these kids. They're third graders already.
Exactly, miss you. You really can't
know. First, because of COVID, and then
who's
because
telling
of
the truth and not?
They're now able to study
especially when you're going close to
6 meters below ground, protected
information sources that have a very big dog in the fight.
Permanent underground school in Ukraine.
Yeah, underground school.
A bit unusual at first. But for kids like 9-year-old Sasha,
first lesson today, kids. This is a son.
Studying at home.
Get to know it well in your book. You'll probably never see it again.
I would either run into the corridor or hide underneath the table, near the wall, away from the window.
In general, public schools in Kharkiv
they're inferring that Russia's military is just out there deliberately blowing up schools.
Staying in multiple schools of the district. Classes have to take turns. The city of Kharkiv is planning to build more such schools. Those who remain see the ugly glide bomb went down between houses. Homes were destroyed.
Attacks every day. You can.
Kharkiv matters to Ukraine. Its history, culture, universities and industry. But most importantly, it's home to those who live here.
It's the BBC getting to the
Gaza
to TVs. Shackled to hospital beds.
Catch up on a few other stories making headlines today. A group of suspected coup plotters has gone on trial in the German city of Frankfurt. The so-called Reichsbürger, meaning citizens of the Reich, are considered violent and steeped in far-right ideology. The plotters were arrested in 2022 during nationwide raids. Their plot included imposing harsh military law over Germany after a coup. Israel and the U.S. have harshly condemned a move by the International Criminal Court's chief prosecutor to seek arrest warrants for Israeli leaders over the war in Gaza. Karim Khan says he also wants such warrants for Hamas leaders over the October 7th terror attacks. U.S. President Joe Biden said there is no equivalence between Israel and Hamas. ChatGPT maker OpenAI says it's scrapping a synthetic voice that is said to resemble that of Hollywood star Scarlett Johansson. The chatbot's voice drew comparisons to her film Her, which starred the actress. Johansson said in a statement she was shocked, angered, and in disbelief about the voice. Iran is holding funeral services for President Ibrahim Raisi, with government offices and businesses closed ahead of the burial. Tens of thousands took to the streets of Tabriz to mark Raisi's
Surely
passing.
it's
He was killed in a
AI,
helicopter crash
artificial
on Sunday
intelligence.
in
You can
nearby
just go,
mountains,
here,
along
excuse
with
me, hen,
several
can you
other
talk
officials.
differently?
Raisi became
Yes, I
president
can
in
compute.
2021 and was seen
Aye,
as a
I'm
deeply
a
conservative and hardline
independently thinking robot.
Meanwhile, many leaders and officials from across the world have been sending condolences. The reaction among the Iranian diaspora has been mixed.
The news of President Raisi's death sent shockwaves across Iran and beyond. Messages of condolence have been pouring into the country, many from regional neighbours, as well as allies and partners in other
Who the fuck's that? Looks like television or some shit. That a bingo
Iranian
advert?
embassies worldwide have seen both condolences and celebrations. In neighbouring Iraq, mourners lit candles and paid tribute to Raisi. In Moscow, some people came to lay flowers and offer their condolences.
He said
At
he was
Iran's embassy in
Shiite, wasn't he?
Beijing, the flag flew at half-mast and the foreign ministry said China had lost a dear friend.
President Raisi made significant contributions to maintaining Iran's security and stability and promoting the country's development and prosperity.
The reaction from the United States was somewhat more ambivalent.
Ebrahim Raisi was a brutal participant in the repression of the Iranian people for nearly 4 decades. That said, we regret any loss of life. We don't want to see anyone die in a
With the
helicopter
smile on
crash.
his face.
But that doesn't change the reality of his record, both as a judge and as the president of Iran, the fact that he has blood on his hands.
In other parts of the world, some were celebrating. In Syria's opposition-held Idlib province, where Iranian-backed terrorist groups have been known to operate, locals handed out sweets.
God almighty, it's hard to keep back.
Outside Iran's embassy
Opposition
in
led.
London, there was
That would
music,
be the
dancing,
Western
and
backed
cheering.
terrorist.
Demonstrators outside the Berlin embassy called this a happy day, as exiled members of the Iranian opposition in Germany made their feelings perfectly clear.
Right, do a close-up. Do a close-up. Aye. Who'd get the biggest crowd?
Nilufar Gulami from DW's Persian service told me more about how President Raisi was regarded by Iranians.
It was and it is actually a happy day for many. Ebrahim Raisi was a hated face among many Iranians. He was known as the Butcher of Tehran for his role in execution of political prisoners in the late 80s as a member of prosecution committee. And also he was involved in many political prisoners' executions when he was the Chief Justice of Iran. And it's not only Raisi, but also his foreign minister, Amir Abdullahian, who was most hated for denying killing of protesters in Iran during the protests after the death of Gina Mahsa Amini. So for many, this was a good news, and like Iranians gathered in front of regime embassies in London, Brussels, Berlin, and some other cities to celebrate their death.
Now, many people are wondering what's going to happen next in Iran. We know that an interim president has been appointed and that an election will be held soon, but could we still see a power struggle at the top in Iran?
No, but we're going to suggest that
Media, there will be a presidential election on June 28th. The interim president, Mokhber, is a member of IRGC, and he is very close to the supreme leader Khamenei. Also, he has been a key figure in many vital institutions for the financial empire of Khamenei. For instance, before his vice presidency, Mokhber was the head of execution of Imam Khomeini's
You're right, buddy. That shop is phenomenal. The only problem is when it started going a wee bit upmarket-ish, if you get me, the prices went up. It used to be really, really cheap and cheerful.
I think
it's now more not so cheap and cheerful.
Who will be the next president, no matter hardliner or reformist?
I can remember about 20, 25 years ago when Greg started doing the big softy.
Two political parties. However, in principle, both are committed to the Islamic Republic existence, and of course, it's not clear how long Khamenei would be alive, and if at the time of his death,
No, you're
IRGC
talking
and
like
its
what,
supporters have
150 for
more
a pasta?
power,
A
it will be
pasty?
a big win for after
Like
Khamenei's
steak
era,
bakes or even
unless the
more?
people of Iran
Or
can
even a cup of
disrupt this game.
bacon tomato
Now,
soups
as you
through the
well
roof.
know, Iran is heavily involved in various conflicts in the region, in Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, and of course it backs Hamas in Gaza. Will the deaths of the president and foreign minister change any of that, do you think?
No, there won't be a change in any of those destabilizing activities in the region. The strategic decisions are set by the supreme leader and the IRGC, not the president. And the situation won't change either of that. So the support for militia and terrorist groups will continue as long as they have the possibility and as long as the Islamic Republic regime rules the country.
Nilüfer, thank you very much for talking with us. That was Nilüfer Gulami from DW's Persian service.
Iran still the bad guys.
You're watching
Still
DW
take out
News.
more of
Up
them.
next, Close Up looks at how car tires drive deforestation. Thanks for watching.
With elections coming up and all that, Jasmine,
Hummingbirds
you know,
not get
you
drunk.
like those two who I think they were two favourites. Weren't they? One of them was
How much water do we need
favourite
per day?
to replace the dear leader.
Stressed out plants
So does it
scream for
leave
help.
the,
Find the
as they were
answers.
saying there, a
It's
power
not on
vacuum
DW Science and
that
TikTok
maybe someday that you might be a wee bit more pro-Western, if you might call it that.
Tropical rainforests to natural rubber from the tropics. Thailand's
That was
tropical
the
climate is
Illuminati.
perfect for growing a raw
Mm,
material
okay.
coveted the world over. It's 5 a.m. and farmer Satit Promraksa is already at work,
amazing how
harvesting
they do that.
natural rubber. 7 years after being planted, a rubber tree has an annual yield of 1.5 kilograms. People have been making use of this tree sap for over 3,000 years,
Let me see,
beginning
it
with
was
indigenous
news.
peoples like the Maya in Central America. At the end of the 19th century, the British began planting the trees in their Asian colonies.
Scraping rubber makes me happy. It's a tradition passed down from one generation to the next. My grandparents
It's
harvested
interesting
rubber.
as this is.
I love my job. I can feed
It's
my...
more Captain Planet than it is news. So, in fact, let's laugh at how these folk are covering it. Austrian Chancellor.
ECHR, we have to sort out the Human Rights Act, which embeds it. These are all heffalump traps, which
Look how small
Blair,
Rishi
Campbell,
Sunak is.
and Brown, and our Tory governments have singularly failed to repeal and change this stuff. So all those heffalump
That
traps
dude
are
just
still
makes
there.
him look so
I like
small.
the
It
use
makes
of
him
the
look
word
like a
heifer. I'm going
little
to have to
boy.
leave it there because I'm running out of time. I do apologise. Rupert, do come on again soon. Reform UK spokesman, thank you for joining us. Very quick
I'm
word from
surprised
Russell
getting
Quirk on
Reform
this.
UK on
just
Rupert
now where
Murdoch.
he said it was magnanimous of Rishi Sunak to make the apology. I don't think that's the case at all. It's easy to make an apology
Yeah.
if you really
Well,
know
also,
that
there's
you're
no
not
option not to
responsible.
make an apology.
I actually worry that certain people like Sunak and Hunt will actually glorify in being the ones that made the apology. They'll see it as kind of political capital, I think.
Yeah, indeed. But again, I think people take it as a given. I mean, after that report, there wasn't an option not to, was there? 10:48 is the time. Up next, we are going to talk about Julian Assange, and I do want to hear your thoughts on his high.
Nothing new.
Say to people, don't.
That's not really my area. I'm the organizer of the event. I have an overview, but I think if you look at the facts and figures that are printed in the newspapers, they are pretty atrocious. I personally wouldn't.
No, don't call me a clairvoyant yet. I see a definite swing to people more and more and more and more wanting gas, electric, water, trains, buses renationalised. You can't move for hearing about all the bad crap the water companies down in England are doing. We've got something a wee bit different up here, in the sense that there is only one Scottish Water. It's kind of, is it partly national? It's partly owned by the government, not all of it. And they just lob a charge in on your council tax, so you don't get metered stuff and all that jazz. This is a different way of structuring it, and it allows Scottish Water to have monopoly on water in Scotland. Which, our water's so good, Coca-Cola came over here, started getting our tap water, sticking it in bottles, and selling it. Great scam. Anyway, I love this guy. Wigan teeth.
Companies make billions of pounds worth of profit.
And only last week, Southwest Water, people couldn't drink the water in the whole of the region. They're getting a couple £100 compensation, aren't they?
Yeah. Should we go and listen to Michael
The reason I'm saying I noticed the pendulum changing is because you get Nigel Farage, Dangleberries, talking about nationalising stuff. And you're like, that's not what the politics you're all about. So you need to... Oh, there's...
We must say to every Jewish citizen in this country,
this is interesting,
your safety is the best guarantee of our security. Your freedom to live as you choose is the only way that we can be certain we remain a land of liberty. Your future is our future. We said never again, and that is a promise we will never, ever disavow. Thank you.
So it's only GB News that's covering it.
Thank you again for coming, and of course, if people would like to ask me questions or indeed put points, please feel free. And if anyone would like to, please put their hand
Is
up.
criticising Zionism anti-Semitic?
On behalf of a media organisation or a community group. Or...
That was Michael Gove there raising awareness in the UK of anti-Semitism, but the vast majority of it, of course, coming from the Muslim community because of events in the Middle East.
Yep, since Gaza, and we heard Luciana Berger speaking just a moment ago. She's going to be back with us in the studio a little later.
I don't take the
Labour
chance.
Party over the extraordinary anti-Semitism which was not stamped out by Jeremy Corbyn. The Equalities and Human Rights Commission made a devastating landmark report about anti-Semitism on his watch. She's saying now, in her lifetime, she's in her early 40s.
Doubling down on that push, isn't he?
And that is terrible.
Let's see what you've been saying at home. Libby has just said there's no cross-party needed. Tell the water companies no more effluent, she doesn't use that word, in our rivers, or we will take your companies off you and send you to prison. I sometimes wish we could do that, actually. And Livy says, I couldn't swim in someone's poo even if I had my mouth closed. But,
well, I know what you mean.
I know. And Jonathan says, sometimes you do say sentences on this programme that you don't think you're going to come out. Jonathan says, the rivers will clean themselves, but we've got to stop dumping poop in them. I do not think it's rocket science, but I bet it costs the taxpayer a lot of money. And Nigel, I'll post this again, he says, renationalising the water companies. I worked for the Environment Agency before it was privatised. I worked on the land drainage side of the company. He goes on to say the company was self-regulatory. It took itself to court. Oh, it's a very long message. I will read it while we take the weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I just don't even see the argument of all this stuff. If the people
GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office.
Democratically want them renationalised,
across the eastern parts tomorrow, but through today,
just the argument of why they're private in the first place is beyond me. Anything where there is just a natural monopoly, what you allowing competition in, therefore, all you do is get more pigs at the trough, more money disappearing.
Elsewhere, there will be quite a few
thus less investment.
And in any sunshine,
I mean, it's not rocket science.
Temperatures peaking in the mid to high teens, possibly just about getting into the low 20s Celsius. More showers to come as we head towards this evening, and they are going to be pretty heavy for some of us, even across parts of Scotland, though they won't be especially frequent here. We could see some downpours. A decent amount of bright or sunny spells around, though towards eastern parts holding on to a bit more cloud here. Plenty of showers though across parts of Northern Ireland, likely to see some disruption, especially on the roads. Could be a bit of surface water flooding. Also plenty of showers across many parts of England and Wales, and here they could be heavy.
I know, Roberto, man, it's craziness. See if you were to get a time machine and go back.
As we go through overnight Tuesday into Wednesday, we are going to see more showery rain developing, and there's the potential for some more persistent rain to kick in across eastern parts.
There'll be some people that don't drink tap water
as well.
And
Quite a bit of cloud for
they
many
go
of
into
us,
shops
so temperatures aren't going to drop a huge amount, but there can be some murkiness for some of us, some mist, some fog patches.
What are you talking about?
Tomorrow, the big talking point will be the heavy persistent rain. A bit of uncertainty as to how far west this is going to spread, but it is across eastern areas that it's most likely to be pretty wet here. Some heavy persistent rain. Meanwhile, further west, it's looking slightly drier, but some showery outbreaks. Some bright or sunny spells, though, and temperatures looking similar to today. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The next Great British Giveaway winner could be you, with a massive £20,000 in tax-free cash to be won. Imagine how you'd react getting that winning call from us.
Oh my God, are you joking?
Not lying, I never won a penny in my life.
I don't know what to say.
Do you know what? I've never won anything like this in my life. Oh my God. Oh God. Oh, it shocked me.
This is amazing.
For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text prize to
focus. Right, what else have we got? Let's see what the Yankee Doodle Dandies are talking about.
At this hour, mourners in black on your screen begin gathering today for days of funerals and processions for Iran's late president, foreign minister, and others who were killed in a helicopter crash. A government-led series of ceremonies are aimed at both honoring the dead and projecting strength in an unsettled Middle East. For Iran's Shiite theocracy, mass demonstrations have been crucial since millions thronged the streets of Tehran back during the Islamic Revolution. Well, joining us live this morning to further explain is national security expert with the University of New Haven, Ken Gray. Always a pleasure having you, Ken. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Janae. Glad to be with you again.
Glad to have you. So early in the wee hours of this morning, we saw the mourners gathering in black, starting the days of those funeral processions. We've seen several coming forward, leaders across the globe, saying how this is just a sad time for Iran. If you could provide that historical aspect and set us up with what we'll be seeing in the coming days.
Sure. So Iran declared 5 days of mourning for the death of their president, their foreign minister, and others. And so we will see over the next couple of days these funeral processions, these mourning sessions throughout Iran, mourning the death of President Reza and others. You know, this is interesting that this outward display of mourning here for President Reza is one part of the equation, but also at the same time, we are seeing the maneuvers behind the scenes into who is going to become the next president of Iran, and that will require a couple of people to juggle positions.
Always nice to get new pictures.
As it is right now, the son of the supreme leader,
Multicolour.
Khamenei, his son Moshtaba, has been named interim president. And it's likely that he will eventually replace his father as supreme leader of Iran. And so there is more than just the mourning for the death of their president going on at this point there in Iran.
if we look at the events, the timeline of events that got us to this point, we know that this was a chopper crash. We know that at first the investigators were hesitant to say if this was an actual death. They were just saying that he was missing. We saw foggy weather conditions out in that area, even rain, knowing that the Iran president was traveling to connect a dam, something, I guess, for international relations. Knowing that this has happened, and we kind of hit on it yesterday, Ken, knowing that even though weather conditions could be the cause of this, I don't think Iran is taking that as the excuse. I think they're saying, you know what, there might be more to this. And we've seen fighting erupt since this happened.
Yeah. So Iran is a country of conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories are always put forward for any major event.
So what would you call America?
Aspects are always put forward that you hear that this was either the result of a sabotage of the aircraft.
This is what I wanted to hear.
The Israel was behind this, that the United States was behind this, or that other factions within Iran, militant factions within Iran, may be responsible for this this sabotage. Despite the fact that there were foggy conditions and that this was an old helicopter, one that should have been retired long before, but because of sanctions on Iran, they did not have parts to do the ability to keep up maintenance, and it certainly did not have modern navigational assistance that would help it avoid a mountainside. That being said, helicopters are dangerous platforms to fly in the first place. Even the United States military often has helicopter crashes. And so, nonetheless, it is to be expected that the Iranians will blame a number of others for this crash. But you know, with this crash, despite the mourning that is going on, there are also those in Iran that are celebrating at the death of the butcher of Tehran.
Liberal values
The Rezai had presided over the execution of thousands of Iranians, and so not everybody is actually mourning his passage.
As we were discussing the weather conditions, I brought in this video so we could provide some perspective.
Let's make it a party.
I mean, why did they even get in this helicopter in the first place? Obviously, I mentioned that, you know, they were going to connect this dam, but seeing the weather conditions, you would think that those who were a part of his cabinet would have steered him away from getting into the helicopter. Seeing this, I mean, this is a close-up shot there of the investigators, and you can barely see them, and it's right in front of our eyes.
Type of ship you make, Roberto?
You know, foggy conditions are a dangerous thing to take off and land in. Once you get airborne, quite often you fly above the fog, and so it may very well have been that when the helicopter took off from the dam area there with the border of Azerbaijan, that it was not in foggy conditions and flew into foggy conditions there along the mountain range. But you know, even without the fog, helicopters often crash, especially older helicopters like this that don't have sufficient parts and maintenance to keep them up. But if you're the pilot, you're supposed to make the decision on a go or no-go based upon the situation. But if I were the pilot and I had the president there as my passenger, and he said, let's go, I think I would fly with the president also at that time. So I'm not surprised that they flew into these type of conditions.
Getting back to the incident, Ken, putting the video back up from early this morning as several in the area coming together, we could potentially even see protests erupt of those who aren't happy with the next regime of who will be leading Iran. I want to ask you, you know, you did mention a very pivotal thing when you mentioned.
Right, so that is the news cycle for today. Risk of sudden flooding. My God, they're not scaring you about one thing, they're scaring you about fucking wet weather in the UK. So, got that blood crisis. Nobody's asking the real questions. Who is going to be held accountable? And it's tantamount to murder if it was done deliberately and they used small kids and other people as just guinea pigs. as part of the medical industrial complex. Got the funerals of all those Iranian dudes that died in the helicopter. The Slovak, let me get this right, Prime Minister, not President, the Slovak Prime Minister is recovering. He's no longer, life is no longer under threat. But that's not even making it onto the news cycle on any of the programmes at the moment. You've got that New Caledonia place kicking off, old French territory. And I think Press TV are still just endlessly rolling.
Spirituality, the truth, and justice. It expounds upon the unity of mankind, proclaiming all earthly inhabitants.
I think this is live, I think.
It's
no, in fact,
all towards human dignity.
It seems to have a 2023 timestamp of
the
it.
Blessings sought by mankind. What has the Quran said to infuriate and focus the attention of those who seek power and hold the reins of power? The Quran says, humans do not accept oppression. And with this pursuit, you will be able to reach elevated divine values. The Quran.
See, preaching. I think you get the idea. So let's have a wee look at what some of the other rags are saying. So France breaks with Western allies to support ICC decision. That's interesting. Didn't see anything about that on France 24, which is even more interesting, but you're getting it on CNN. France's support for court's decision to seek arrest warrants for Hamas and Israeli leaders marks a split between its position and that of allies including US, UK and Italy. Trump trial reaches crescendo. I'm just sick and tired of that whole bull crap, man. Middle East turmoil, funeral ceremonies for Irans were coming. Really despicable event. Germany says seeking of ICC arrest warrants for Hamas creates false equivalence, so Germany's still on board. Israeli president says normalisation with Saudi Arabia. Right. Did I just imagine that when it was talking about France? France broke from its Western allies to support the ICC. France broke from its Carmen Khan sounds Indian. Sounded American. British, sorry. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. Have CNN still got that as their headline? It's very interesting. I suppose he could be Indian, couldn't he? He's a very light Indian dude. Thrill kill. Judge's potential game-changing decision. Fox News. Yada, 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 man. I'm pretty sure most of the Americans must be absolutely sick and tired of all that pish. It really has turned into, what's that film, Mediocrity? Russia scoffs at US reaction to likely ICC. Well, everybody's getting in on the action. So, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you like politics but are sick of the tits, then tune in for your daily PoliTITS. There's many different English-speaking talking holes as I can find to compare notes and see they're pretty much all telling you the same things, but some will tell you how to think about it a wee bit differently. Certainly do their best to get the boot in. So have a nice day. I'll hopefully catch you tomorrow at 5 to 9. Get it. Oh, good catches.
Clips, clips.
And remember, citizens, always subscribe. Hit the notification bell as well. And $19.95 plus shipping and handling will keep you out of hell.